Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. On this beautiful day, I called to order the FORA Reuse Authority, the monthly board meeting. I'd ask our Deputy Director, Steve Inslee, if he would do us the honor of leading us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Please join me. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Steve. Okay, we'll be going into closed session real soon. The items in closed session: counsel, legal counsel, existing litigation, government code 54956.9 alpha, 2 cases. First, Keep Fort Ord Wild versus Fort Ord Reuse Authority, case number M114961, and the City of Marina versus Fort Ord Reuse Authority, case number M11856. Prior to going to closed session, I ask, is any member of the public wishing to address the board with regard to any of these items we'll be discussing in closed session? Seeing none, public comments closed. We are adjourning in open session, reconvening next door in closed session. We'll be back as soon as we possibly can. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm reconvening the board of the Fort Ord Reuse Authority. Sorry for the delay. We're trying to get one of our members, Supervisor Jane Parker, on the line. We have the wonders of modern technology to fight through, so hopefully she'll be able to join us shortly, and she'll call in, and hopefully we'll get some contact with her. John, if you'll go ahead and report out from closed session, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. The Fort Ord board met in closed session and heard the items that are listed on the closed session agenda: Keep Fort Ord Wild versus Fort Ord Reuse Authority, and the City of Marina versus Fort Ord Reuse Authority. The board heard from council, and there's nothing to report out.
Thank you very much, John. Okay, if we could have roll call, please.
City of Carmel by the Sea, Councilmember Beach. Here. City of Delray Oaks, Chair Edelin.
Here.
City of Marina, Mayor Pro Tem O'Connell. Here. City of Marina, Councilmember Morton. Here. City of Monterey, Councilmember Selfridge. Here. Monterey County Supervisor Potter. Here. Monterey County Supervisor Calcagno.
Here.
Monterey County Supervisor Parker. City of Pacific Grove, Councilmember Lucius. Here. City of Salinas, Mayor Gunter.
Here.
City of San City, Mayor Pendergrass. Here. City of Seaside, Mayor Rubio.
Here.
City of Seaside, Mayor Pro Tem Oglesby. Here. 20th Congressional District, Alec Arago. 17th State Senate District, Nicole Charles. Here. 29th State Assembly District, Erica Parker. University of California, Graham Bice. Here. California State University, Eduardo Ochoa. Here. Monterey Peninsula College, Vicky Nakamura. Here. Monterey Peninsula Unified School District, Dan Alpert Jr. Here. Monterey Salinas Transit, Hunter Harvath. Transportation Agency of Monterey County, Debbie Hale. Here. United States Army, Colonel Fellinger. Here. Fort Ord BRAC Office, Bill Collins. Here. Marina Coast Water District, Director Moore.
Here.
Chair Edelin, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Lena. If you'll notice up here, Michael Hulamard, our executive officer, is not here. His wife had an accident back east in Rhode Island, so he flew back to be with her. Not really serious, but he has his priorities correct with his family first. And we were ably represented by Steve Inslee, his deputy, so things will go on as normal. I'd like to also welcome Councilmember Casey Lucius from Pacific Grove. She'll be a new member of our board. I've worked with her in the past on several occasions. She's a top quality. She'll make a very good member of our board. Welcome, Casey. We appreciate you being here. Okay, also Jane Parker is, she's the one we're trying to get on the phone right now, and hopefully she'll join us shortly before we have any votes to make. Next, acknowledgments, announcements, and correspondence. Last Saturday, the Army held their annual community workshop and bus tour. The same day, the East Garrison Housing Project held their grand opening. Despite overcast weather and light rain, both events had significant participation. Well over 100 participants participated in the Army community workshop. Some of you may also not be aware, but one of FORA's function has been to assist the local jurisdiction with wildlife fire protection. In 2003, FORA purchased 4 wildlife fire engines for the cities of Monterey, Seaside, and Marina, as well as the Ord military community. Delray Oaks tried to get it, but we didn't get any, unfortunately. FORA also acquired a 2,100-gallon water tender for the Salinas Rural Fire Protection District. These purchases are included in the Capital Improvement Program and are required under the Base Reuse Plan Environmental Impact Report. These engines are now officially paid for in full. We're happy to announce transmittal of all the of title to all the jurisdictions that requested these materials. We have present today Seaside Fire Chief Brian Dempsey. Would you raise your hand, sir? Thank you. Preceded of Monterey Fire Chief Marsh Fielder, sir, and Monterey Fire Chief Gondez Panholzer. Sir, there are 3 of the major recipients. We appreciate your participation in this program, and thank you for the work you do for our communities and keeping us safe. Let's have a round of applause for our fire professionals. Again, thank you very much. We appreciate it. Okay, the consent agenda. I've been asked to pull the board meeting minutes from the consent agenda. There's some tidying up that has to be done. As part of this, we have a request by Ms. Molly Erickson, Esquire. She'd like to make a public statement to the board. Ma'am?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You say that there's some tidying up that needs to be done. Could you clarify that first so I can comment on whatever the final...
My staff
Solution
said that there were some comments made about some areas that had to be tidied up on the agenda and on the minutes, and asked me to pull it, so that's what I did. I pulled it. I don't have the actual details right now.
Okay, I'm wondering if you're going to delay that so that the public
Yes.
can see what the tidying up is.
Yes, it'll be brought back next month.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate that.
Anytime.
Is Director Parker on the line?
She's
Not-
not on yet.
Not yet. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Molly Erickson on behalf of Keep Fort Ord Wild and the Open Monterey Project. Earlier this week, we wrote FORA a letter saying that the public hearing was not formally closed on February 13th, 2014. Yesterday, FORA released draft minutes, and for agenda item 8A sub I, or little Roman 1, with a statement that says that, quote, Chair Edelin declared the public hearing closed. That is not, in fact, what happened. I'm going to play what happened.
Any other members of the public wishing to address the board of directors on this item? Going once, going twice. Thank you very much. Back to the board. Last minute comments or an entertaining motion? Mr. Chairman.
As you can hear, at no point did the chair declare the hearing closed, which is exactly what it says in the minutes that you're being asked to approve today. That is a false statement, and adding false information to a public document is a violation of law. You should not approve the minutes with that false statement. You should do a prompt investigation as to how that false statement came to be added to the public document, to disclose the results to the public, and turn over the findings to the District Attorney's Office and the State Attorney General of California. In fact, every single time that the FORA Board has considered a second vote on a consistency determination on a legislative item, this FORA Board has taken comment, both from the public and from the board. I'd be happy to answer any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. With regard to closing the public hearing last time, that was my fault. I said going once, going twice in sort of a jestful manner. I think most people in the audience, I think 99.9% of the people here realized when I said going once, going twice, it meant that was going to be the closing of the public hearing. That's my mistake. The staff interpreted it that way. Again, my mistake. So in order to rectify that mistake, I now declare the public hearing from last month closed. We can now go in the Guinness Book of World Records for having the longest public hearing of over a month since last month to this month. So basically, again, my mistake on that. Okay. Well, the lawyers will settle that.
To the chair,
Yes.
I'm concerned, last month I appeared by telephone, and in my communications with many board members, I'm sorry, but I appeared last month, February 14th, to be heard on the consistency determination by telephone, And in my discussion with people that are my colleagues on this board, nobody could understand anything that I said. And I do have to say, I could not understand anything that happened in this meeting except for who was right next to the telephone where Lena is sitting. I would like to be able to say what I had to say. I think it's critical to the issue of the consistency, and I would like it on the record.
You'll be given the opportunity today to say that.
Thank you.
Okay. Also, it was my intent last month when I said going once, going twice, that meant the end of the public hearing. My comment today was a joke. I guess there's not a lot of humor floating around here today. I will try to keep my humor to a minimum, and I'll stick a little bit more closely to the business. Okay, next we have the second vote for the consistency determination. Consider certification in whole or in part of the 2010 Monterey County General Plan as consistent with the 1997 FORA reuse plan. Okay, a notice public hearing is held at the first appearance of a consistency determination agenda item. The public hearing for this item was held at the February 13th board meeting. At that time, the board took comments from all members of the public wishing to speak. The formal public hearing is not reopened if the item returns for a second vote. However, the Brown Act requires that we receive comments on each agenda item, and we fully intend to receive comments related to the second vote today. Representatives of special interests have challenged the positioning of this particular agenda item, including questioning postings, notices, agenda positioning, and past practices. This month, these individuals request to attach a letter to this agenda item in the board packet. It is not the FORA's practice to accept requests from the public for inclusion of materials in the board packet. FORA provides the board at fora.org, that's BOARD @fora.org email address to allow the public a method of submitting timely comments directly to all board members. Emails received at this address are posted on the FORA website and are linked to the agenda packet through the public correspondence staff report. In keeping with the current practice, FORA staff responded to the request by posting the letter in question to the website and linking it to the agenda packet and emailing it to the board on 2 separate occasions. At this time, all public correspondence on this item has been transmitted to the board. So what I'm going to do is we're going to ask if anybody has any public comment with regard to the second vote. I'm going to allow public comment for the second vote. We'll then bring it back to the board. If any board member wishes to make a statement, one statement in summary, not a debate, not an argument going back and forth, we've already had that last time, then you may do so. Then I will then call for the vote, the second vote. We will have the second vote by roll call, and it either passes or doesn't pass. Okay? Right now I'm opening the public comment period. Does any member of the public wish to speak to the board with regard to the second vote on the consistency determination of the Monterey County General Plan? Sir.
Hello, my name is Jason Campbell, a resident of Seaside. Thank you for staying true to item 10, which is comments on a specific agenda item are heard under that item. I think it's pretty clear that we have a right to speak on this item, which is on the agenda. I have not heard anyone. Is Director or Supervisor Parker on the line yet?
She is.
Great. I have not heard anyone argue that the 2 plans are consistent. Even staff at the last meeting acknowledged that they are not consistent, and they went so far as to say they made the hollow commitment to follow the base reuse plan. This is the same staff that had 3+ years to make the 2 plans consistent. I think the vote here is very straightforward. Are the plans consistent substantially? And all the evidence shows they are not consistent. No. Simple vote. They are not consistent. That's a simple and honest way to vote on this issue. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next speaker.
Good afternoon. I'm Jan Schreiner, speaking as a resident of Marina. I also hold a position on the Marina Coast Water District Board of Directors, but I am not speaking for the board. I am speaking as a resident of Marina. And I have concerns that I would like to have heard regarding the general plan and the water. I have heard that land use decisions and water supply decisions should be made by different people serving on different boards. For example, I was once a Public Works Commissioner in the city of Marina. When I was elected to the Water District Board, I was told that if I were to win, I would have what's called an incompatibility of offices, and I had to resign from the Public Works Commission because it is a land use decision-making board. So perhaps this is an old philosophy, but I did not press the issue through the court system. Now it seems to me something is evolving or changing, that old philosophy is quietly going away. We have mayors groups forming, working on water projects. We have mayors and supervisors meeting to further water projects. Or sometimes the same people will serve on wastewater boards, such as the Seaside County Sanitation District. And some of these people are here today to make a bold statement about water. So I would like all of you to please reconsider the history of the Carmel River, the overbuilding of the Carmel Valley, the research that's happening internationally to track precipitation through satellites with JAXA and NASA. Consider the statewide drought emergency, the state mandates for meters and consumption reduction, and consider that as the framework of the decision that you might want to decline, that the Monterey County may not actually have an unlimited amount of water for their portions of the Fort Ord. And I would like you to consider that and possibly reconsider that maybe this is a poorly informed decision or statement about water supply. So please take a closer look, recraft the language and bring it back. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Next member, please.
Hi, my name's John Hutcherson. I'm from Monterey. And every time I get up in front of this group, I feel like I'm meeting the firing squad. So I would just like to say that my heresy, that I feel that the aim is on me, is I don't believe that the world began or ended in 1997. And I think all of this can be restudied and looked at again. I think there is an organization that has the following statements of joining. Is it the truth? Es la verdad? There seems to be some great difference in whether what's being presented is the truth. Is it fair to all concerned? There are tens of thousands of people who don't feel that we're being treated fairly. Will it build goodwill and better friendship? I don't think so. Will it be beneficial to all concerned? Well, the same tens of thousands of people would say no. And I just hope that something can chisel 1997 off the tombstone and all of this can be revisited. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Good afternoon, members of the FORA board. My name is Amy White, the Executive Director of Landwatch. As you know, the function of the FORA board is primarily to ensure the policies and programs contained in the base reuse plan are carried out. Finding these two plans consistent would certainly not do that. Landwatch urges you to send this item back to the county, allowing it to fix the Fort Ord master plan and include the missing and misstated policies. And for your information, when this item was before the Board of Supervisors, 2 supervisors rejected the consistency for the same reasons you should reject it today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am.
Good afternoon. My name is Levon Stone. I'm the Executive Director of the Fort Ord Environmental Justice Network. And the Monterey County General Plan should correspond with the communities that was put out of business when the base closed. It should also correspond with the state general plan. The state general plan is inclusive of environmental justice communities, disenfranchised communities, the right to participate in the decision-making processes of whatever decisions are being made that affects them. People lost, families were destroyed, jobs taken away. Most of those families were civilian employees of the Army. Most of those families were veterans. There were children involved. We had a nasty process. And for anybody who feels like there is no responsibility to the local people living here who are still suffering these same devastations, we have, with the civilian employees on the bottom rungs of the ladder, there's no raises, there's no promotions, there is nothing. Nobody's concerned. But all over the country, we hear about how some people might be destroyed economically if certain things were done, so there's a lot of help for them. What is wrong here in Monterey County? We need jobs. We need vocational job training skills used in our community. We need a process that is going to be equal, that is going to look at the people who are not sitting here in this room and around this table. And I've spoken about that forever, and I'm still speaking about it. And I'm still looking at when is the emphasis going to be put on the things that, the concerns that were brought forth to the FORA board over and over again, even with the new process.
30 seconds.
And they are still not being addressed. And they must be addressed. They will have to be addressed. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Good afternoon, FORA board. My name is Michael Salerno. I'd like to make a few comments on behalf of Keep Fort Ord Wild. And Chair Edelin, thank you for opening the public comment again. Today, there's only one logical vote for the board, and that would be a no vote on consistency. We've heard from KFOW, we've heard from the Sierra Club, we've heard from Landwatch and Jane Haynes, and all the legal counsel that goes with them. There's plenty of substantive evidence that the plans are not consistent. Therefore, that requires a no vote on the consistency. Looking ahead, what's the solution? Well, it's easy. Send it back to the county and copy the policies and programs from the reuse plan into the general plan. Excuse me, the Fort Ord portion of the general plan. It's not a big deal. The county's done it before. The base reuse plan has already passed environmental review many years ago. I'd also ask the FORA board members to look ahead to a day when when FORA sunsets, when they don't exist. Who will be there to enforce the reuse plan? In the future, if we have a weak version of the county general plan that doesn't have the policies and programs that the reuse plan does, and the associated restrictions on water and housing and all the other things that the reuse plan contains, what are we left with? We've been told if we find the plans consistent, it won't approve a specific development, and that may be true, but in the future we'll end up with development that was surely not envisioned in the reuse plan. And the job of the FORA board is to perpetuate those policies and programs. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next individual.
Thank you. I'm Steve Eklund. I live in Salinas, and I think we should do everything we possibly can to keep Fort Ord as wild as we possibly can. Any development that needs to be done maybe should be done on the stuff that's already been developed. There's lots of infrastructure that's already here that has to have to be fixed up a little bit, but roads are there, but wiring's there, all kinds of stuff is already there. So let's develop anything there and keep the wild part wild. We could have
turn Florida into a real tourist attraction. But once we start destroying the environment of it, it'll be too late to put it back. So if we find out in 5, 10, 15, 20 years, yeah, we need more land to build more of this stuff, the land will be there. But once we tear the stuff apart and say, oops, we didn't need that, it'll be too late to put it back. So please keep Fort Ord as wild as you can for as long as you can. Because that'll make things a whole bunch better for the people that live here. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Board members, Scott Waltz speaking for the Sierra Club. I didn't have the opportunity to make the last board meeting, so I wanted to be sure to make an appearance today. The Sierra Club has provided several letters to all of you. I think our position is well articulated in those letters. I just want to validate all that and encourage you to vote no on consistency. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
I'm Jane Haynes. I sent a letter to board members this morning. I just want to put on the record that I did send the letter. When I came in, I spoke to one board member who said he received it, so I assume the whole board did. If there's any board member who didn't receive it, I would ask that you ask for a copy before you vote today. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, once again, Molly Erickson on behalf of Keep Fort Ord Wild and the Open Water Ray Project. Very briefly, thank you for taking public comment and opening the public hearing. I would urge you to support the comments made by others today, to take careful concern of the letters that are in your packet and some that are not in your packet. And I would draw your attention to the comments made by Supervisor Calcagno at the last hearing. Supervisor Calcagno's comments, we made a transcript of them. They are attached as Exhibit A to our March 6th letter that is not in your packet, but it was for this item here today. Those comments are eloquent. We draw attention to the fact that things have changed. We know more now than we used to know about water, or that we used to admit about water. And there are very significant issues that I believe the county would like to address, and I think many people believe should be addressed, as Supervisor Calcagno stated. My client's simple goal is to have a county plan that is consistent with the reuse plan. That is a very simple goal. We are not trying to litigate. No one likes to litigate. This is not about litigation. This is simply about having county plans that are consistent with the reuse plan, which is exactly what is mandated by this body's Master Resolution, Chapter 8. Chapter 8 was enacted as a result of the Sierra Club settlement. So that is the goal, to have a county plan that is consistent with this body's reuse plan. We're also trying to help FORA simply operate more effectively and make it easier for the public and decision makers to access information and to apply the policies and programs when a project comes forward. We urge the board to vote no and to allow the matter to return to the county where these matters can be addressed, specifically water. My great-grandfather, in closing, had a very few things that I have brought down from him, but he had a very good statement and a very good sort of thing that he lived by, which is, if you're presented with something, in this case it was initiatives on the ballot, if you were presented with an initiative or something on the ballot and it confused you in any way, vote no. The reason is because if it's a good idea, it will come back. It will come back to you in the future in an improved condition. We urge you to vote no on this item. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. Next speaker. Any other member of the public wishing to address the board with regard to this item? Seeing none, public comment period is closed. We go back to the board. Does any member of the board wish to discuss this item, one bite at the apple? Yes, Nancy.
Yes. At last meeting, Supervisor Calcagno brought up some points about water that I don't think this board has ever discussed before. So I just want to say I appreciated that, and it gave me a lot to think about over this since the last meeting.
Yes, Dave.
So, Mr. Chair, I'm prepared to move that we certify that the 2010 Monterey County General Plan is consistent with the FORA reuse plan, and I would ask for a second. I'd speak to it briefly.
Second.
You know, I spoke to this topic the last time, one that for some reason we were debating the topic of water. That's not what's before us right now. There's two issues that are lying out there. One is a concern that this is somehow prematurely approving development projects that are supposedly in the mill. That is not before us today. Those projects will have to go through their own independent review, their own CEQA review, their own analyses. That is not before us. What's before us really is this allegation that the changes are of some gargantuan magnitude that really is going to affect the entire language of the general plan itself and consistency with the Ford reuse plan. I'd like to have Carl Holm or John Ford come forward. I've asked this question repetitively of council, is what is the magnitude of these language changes, and are they really as catastrophic or as damaging as been alleged? And I've constantly gotten the answer that they are not, and that's what gives me the comfort to move this forward.
Through the chair, if I may.
Please, go ahead.
Carl Holm with Monterey County Resource Management Agency. The county's general plan and the Ford master plan that's within it doesn't have every single word that's in the base reuse plan, but it has been our opinion as well as our county council's opinion that it is consistent. And in fact, it doesn't have to be exactly the same as the base reuse plan. It's kind of like our coastal plans aren't exactly the same as the Coastal Act, but they're still found consistent with the Coastal Act. This is a very similar manner. A simple amendment to the county's general plan, well, that's another question as far as what's simple. It's all relative, and with Monterey County land use and water, nothing's simple. So, but we do feel that it is consistent.
Right. Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion and a second on the floor. Before we go for the roll call vote, does any other member of the board wish to have a comment? Yes, Lou, go ahead.
In the last meeting, I sort of gave an overview of the water issues, and I did vote at the board level against this consistency. I'm not going to dry on the cross over this issue. However, I will make one statement, and since this last meeting, I've reviewed the plans over and over and had my staff review them and talk to legal counsel and go through the whole thing, and I basically came up with one conclusion when it was all said and done. So if I can make that prepared statement, and that'll be my final statement. I have a great concern about the effect of approving the resolution certifying that the 2010 general plan is consistent with the Ford base reuse plan. I agree with many of the points that were brought up by staff in the rebuttal to the many comment letters that were submitted by the public except one. In a letter dated October 23, 2013 from Betty Young, Director of Research Management for Monterey County, to Johanan Garcia, Senior Planner for FORA, Mr. Young explains that Monterey County General Plan contains a presumption that development within Zone 2C enjoys a long-term sustainable supply of water, but the fact that the presumption is a rebuttable presumption makes the general plan and its area plans consistent with the base reuse plan. A rebuttable presumption means that unless evidence is presented to disprove the presumption is considered to be fact. The effect of this language is shifted the burden of proof from the developer to the general public, and I find this to be inconsistent with the policy of the base reuse plan, which clearly restricts the development on FORA to a cumulative water use within the detailed resource allocation. From my reading, this presents two major problems. First, the general public is saddled with the burden of proving that there is no long-term supply of water. Not that the project water uses exceeds the allocation allowed, and second, those applicants whose projects do conform to the water allocation may be subject to legal challenges because, in fact, there is no long-term sustainable supply of water for Fort Ord at this time. I conclude that should we certify the consistency of the general plan without clarifying the discrepancies between a long-term sustainable supply of water and a water allocation plan, we are exposing applicant, the county, and the general public to unnecessary prolific litigation. And, that's my analysis, and I'll just stand behind it, and where we go from there, wherever the vote comes, I'll live with it.
Mayor Rubio.
Yeah, somehow or another, this turned out to be a discussion about water. And the water that was used on this base when it was a live base is a lot more than what's contemplated by the base reuse plan. And there's a reliance on our contracted water vendor to augment those water supplies. We know that there's going to be more activity on this base than anticipated. But that responsibility goes to that water vendor. In my view, the fact that the Fort Ord reuse plan has precedent over any other general plan on the reuse space is enough comfort for me to say that we can move forward on this project. Now, as far as the water, we're going to be getting a very detailed update from Marina Coastal Water and their plans to augment the water. So before we go around saying there's not enough water, there are plans for more water. So I don't see that as the reason for denying this this motion. Thank you.
Any other member of the board wishing to make, yes, Gail, please.
Yes, thank you. I want to follow up on what Supervisor Calcano has said, and unfortunately last month, I wasn't able to hear his comments. One of the critical positions that we hold as a board is the decision and trying to put the base reuse plan into place. As every jurisdiction comes forward to us and asks for a consistency determination, we as a FORA board member are to look at that and make sure that the reuse plan provisions are mirrored in these jurisdictions' documents. This is our one opportunity to do that. And we need to take that very seriously. FORA will sunset in 2020. There will be no board, no body implementing the base reuse plan. FORA was created as a regional board to put these dictates of what was in the reuse plan into the guiding documents of the county, the city of Seaside, the city of Marina, and all of the jurisdictions that got land divvied up to it with the former Fort Ord. Last meeting, there were many, many comments about the difference between the mandatory versus discretionary language, enforcement of policies. The mandatory language is what's in the certified EIR for the base reuse plan, and for those inconsistencies, that alone should be enough to send this back to the county to have it lift the accurate language. The overall catchphrase of that we intend as a county to comply with the base reuse plan is not the standard in law. The standard is they're going to look at the specific terms, the generalized terms in the front of the county plan to be consistent, or the intent to be consistent and comply with the base reuse plan is not what a court of law will look at in the enforcement. They're going to look at the terms. We are creating a dichotomy between two documents that will create litigation that we shouldn't need to do. It is easy to send it back to the county to have them just lift the language and amend their plan to be consistent with the certified EIR and the reuse plan. Most importantly, and I'm so glad that Supervisor Calcano raised the issue of water. In our board packet last month, and again this month, at the top of page 3, it states that the plan, there are thresholds set in the resource-constrained base reuse plan that may not be exceeded without other actions, most notably 6,160 new residential housing units and a finite water allocation. The base reuse plan is resplendent with limitations on water and what water we have for the development on former Fort Ord. My major concern with the county general plan is that the 2013 amendment to the general plan is, I put one on everybody's desk because last time when I was reading this, nobody had it, so the privilege of being here. It's the excuse me, the public service element is the policy PS 3.1. And for every development in the county, the general rule is that the developer must come and show that they have a long-term sustainable water supply. This policy, though, exempts from that burden of proof to show you have water for a project, that your project will have water in the years to come, and a reason that you should build it is that you can maintain water for it, and that exemption applies to lands in Zone 2C. The county land in the former Fort Ord are Zone 2C parcels of land. This is the inconsistency. We have a base reuse plan that says we have 6,600 acre feet of water, a finite measure that we have to allocate sparingly and know what we're using it for. But when the county's projects come in for review, they have a presumption of water. So regardless if we've gotten close to that number, if we've exceeded that number, wherever we are, or another jurisdiction wants water, the county project has the luxury of saying we have water. And Supervisor Calcaño read his legal memo about that the rebuttable presumption, the presumption of water, shifts the burden that somebody has to show that there is no water, rather than the developer showing there is water. This is a major inconsistency. What concerns me most as a FORA board member is once we find the county plan consistent with the base reuse plan, any further projects that come in for us, we do not get to examine that to say there's no more water. We do not get to examine to say it's not consistent with the base reuse plan. If the county finds that that plan, that project, is consistent with its general plan that we have certified as consistent, that's the end of the discussion. This is the only opportunity that we have as members of the FORA board to say, make your county plan consistent, so anything that follows this, that comes in, will follow naturally to also be consistent. What we need to do is send this back to the county. It's very easy. The county can do whatever they want with land outside of former Fort Ord. If they want the exemption to apply to Zone 2C properties outside of former Fort Ord, that's not the decision here that we're asking anybody to make. What we're saying is go back to the county and ask the county to amend this plan to say that that exemption, the exemption that says you do not need to prove long-term sustainable water, does not apply to those properties owned by the county, those county properties that are within the former Fort Ord. It's a simple fix. They can rely on the EIR from the base reuse plan. This is our job. This is our job today, is to send it back to the county, have them fix it. There's a resplendent record of what are the inconsistencies. It's not going to be hard to fix. Let's please vote to send it back. Thank you.
Any other member of the board wishing to make a comment?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
just because there's been so much legalese thrown around, I'd prefer to hear from our counsel also on her interpretations of what's just been said.
Go ahead.
Through
Do
the
it,
chair.
please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Wendy Strimling, Senior Deputy County Counsel. I just wanted to speak to our office's opinion regarding these issues in relation to policy 3.1. As has been stated, PS 3.1 establishes a rebuttable presumption of a long-term sustainable water supply in Zone 2C of the Salinas Valley groundwater basin. But a rebuttable presumption is not a guarantee. It is rebutted based on the particular facts and circumstances. So the mere fact that you're in Zone 2C does not mean that you automatically are assumed to have water. Instead, you look at other facts and circumstances. Here, there are a couple facts and circumstances that are relevant. The Fort Ord Master Plan specifically provides that the county shall conform to the development and resource management plan adopted by FORA. That's in Program B-1.5
of the FORA master plan, and that policy hasn't been cited in some of the letters you've received. The Development Resource and Management Plan established the allocation of water to the county. So the Fort Ord Master Plan requires the county to conform to the allocation of water. FORA has allocated a specific amount of water for the county to use for development, and there is nothing in Policy 3.1 that contradicts that or that allows the county to ignore that allocation. The county must conform to that allocation. And in addition, the 2001 implementation agreement between the county and Fort Ord established the allocation, and in it, county had to contractually obligate itself not to commit or cause the commitment of water resources that are unavailable to the county. And in that implementation agreement, the exact allocation number was stipulated for the county. FORA Board has since taken a couple other actions that have changed that number a little, but the basic point being that pursuant to our contractual obligation under the implementation agreement, as well as the Fort Ord Master Plan, we are required to conform to the allocation. And since PS 3.1 only is a rebuttable presumption, it doesn't override that. And I will also point out that PS 3.1 requires development to conform to the area plan. The area plan in this case is the Fort Ord Master Plan. So PS 3.1 requires us to conform to the master plan, and the master plan also provides the specific controls over the general. So for all of those reasons, it's our opinion that in fact PS 3.1 does not authorize more water than is allocated under the FORA's allocation to the county. So I wanted you to have the benefit of our interpretation of PS 3.1 when you take your vote.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I appreciate your allowing that testimony. So simply, there is no luxury afforded the county. There's no circumvention. We must conform to the allocation. And what, again, has been the posture here is to say that whatever project's going to go forward gets some sort of premature green light. And that's not the case. The constraints are the same as they are everywhere else. You are resource constrained.
Is there any other member of the board who's not testified thus far? Yes, Councilmember Lucius.
Thank you, Chair. This is the first opportunity that I've had to read many of these documents, and in preparation for this meeting, I read over 800 pages to prepare for this one item. And I have to be honest and say I was trying to be very thorough and read everything, but it doesn't mean I understand what I read. Because in fact, as lawyers have pointed out, the general plan and the base reuse plan can be very complicated language. So in good conscience, I don't think I can make an informed vote, and as a result, I'd like to abstain.
Understood. Any last minute comment? Yes, Victoria. 1 second. We'll have you next.
Jane, you're next, I think. I wanted to, so the board, I think, has in their possession copies of a response, probably not my letter, to the county legal staff, which I asked a follow-up question last time about not really the merits of what we're discussing. I mean, we seem to have a lot of differing opinions on what the merits are. We're sort of divided, unfortunately, on that point. But my question was more to the procedural question of whether whether the county felt there were actually substantive differences with the base reuse plan, and if not, what were the procedural mechanisms we could use to just fix it, and so we could all basically go home happy, which is how I like to go home. I was gratified by their thorough response and the fact that they actually said with a one-word answer there were no differences, none that are of substance. They agree fully with all the comments that everybody is making. They also outlined the process that it takes to get them there. They draft up the revisions, and then it goes through the Planning Commission hearing and a Board of Supervisors hearing
They also said there's an environmental review, but I have come to learn afterwards that they can also rely on the base reuse environmental review, the EIR that's already in place. So it sort of sounds like it's a two-step process after they've drafted the corrections. So I want to thank them for that. I want to thank our chair for what I think has been a wonderful job, Jerry, for attempting to prevent us as a board from being in the situation we find ourselves in today, which is to be at odds with one another on matters of substance. I think that we are here, I want to be here to get stuff done. I would like to implement the base reuse plan. That's what I'd like to do. I think that we have, unfortunately, in this cooling off period between the first vote and the second vote, kind of witnessed a heating up as opposed to a cooling off. And I think that, I have such thoughtful colleagues. I know everyone has, I'm somewhat new, not as new as Casey, to the board. Everyone has so much more experience and background with this, and I respect everybody's opinion. But I actually think that not even on the merits, it would be a good idea for us to just, since there is no difference of opinion between the county and the folks who have come forward with their thoughts on the substance of the matters. They're actually, the county says there is no difference of opinion. Let's just send it back for a procedural process. I know that it will take a couple months or a month or whatever it takes. But if we want to get stuff done on the Fort Ord base, we want to implement the plan, I think that we are setting ourselves up for a better and quicker path if we move in the direction that I think the chair has tried to move this body, which is a more of a consensual direction and a less of a, we'll know we're on the right track when there's sort of more handshaking instead of fist shaking. So I'm hoping we can have a meeting of the minds and that the county will take this back. I'm changing my vote, I hate to say it, so that not because I agree it should necessarily be found inconsistent, but because I feel as though it should go back to the county so that everyone can have a meeting of the minds. I think that's the courteous thing to do. I think it's the right political thing to do. I think it's the right attitude to take. And if there's a meeting of the minds, perhaps even the folks who have protested the language to this point have alerted us to their concerns, might be asked, requested to make an agreement with the board and with the county to be satisfied with the changes that are proposed before. So let's do a little groundwork, I guess, so that we don't find ourselves at odds on the board. That is my wish. And so I'm changing my vote, but I wanted to explain why, that it's not that I actually disagree with the thoughtful colleagues that I have on both sides of the issue.
Thank you, Victoria. Next,
Chair.
Supervisor Parker. She's next.
I'll be after
Thank you,
Supervisor
Mr. Chair.
Parker.
I'll be brief. I just want to say that I fully support Supervisor Calcagno's statement and perspective on the water issue. The county's water policy is definitely part of this consistency determination. I expressed some concerns last month that I will not repeat. I just want to point out that we do have two supervisors, myself and Supervisor Calcagno, who have serious concerns about the consistency of the county plan, and I think the right thing to do is to have us take it back to our board for further discussion and clarification, and as county staff has pointed out, and Victoria Beach has just mentioned, there are, apparently the staff agrees that there are no big differences, so let's get the language to match and make sure the policies do match the base reuse plan. It's not a difficult process. It's easy. We've done it before, and our general plan allows for amendments twice a year, so we can get it done in good time. And I would really, I think that's, as Victoria Beach has said, that's the way to get us all on the same page. Thank you.
Mayor Gunter.
I've read the letter written by the Monterey County Resource Agency, and there are several items they list, and now I'm hearing that we're going to eliminate CEQA on this letter, which makes me wonder how many of these other things are we really going to do? And my next question is, and it's not to be personal with my friends from the county here, but every time we send something to Monterey County, and I heard someone say we'll have this back in a month or so, that'll be amazing. And I know that all the mayors and all the council members up here know better than to believe that. We're looking at 6 months if we're lucky coming out of the Board of Supervisors. That, I figure, we'll put FORA at about 4.5, maybe 5 years left if we're lucky, and we get it back then. I think it's time this board made some decisions and move forward. We've waited a long time, and FORA will run out before we get a decision. Thank you.
Okay, I think everybody's had a chance to comment.
No,
We have a, oh, so I'm sorry, we saved the best for last. Ian.
I would hope so, Chair. I'm gonna just follow on what Mayor Gunther said. You know, sending this back to the county, it won't come back in 4 or 5 months. The opponents of this, all they're going to do if it goes back to the county to say, see what FORA board did, they said it's not consistent, so let's work it out. Let's take a year to figure it out. So we know how that's going to work. But I want to talk about the 2 red herrings, the 2 straw men that came into this boardroom. I guess last time we talked, they were brung up. And the first one is water. Water has nothing to do with this. Has nothing to do with this. This doesn't approve any projects. They're going to have to go through their own determination. If they're found to not have water then they don't have water then. But people throw it up because we know we're short on water. So I would ask that the opponents of this, the people that want us to find this not consistent, is when have we heard them come down here and beat us over the head about getting Marina Coast Water to provide water for Fort Ord? Where is their motion at for that fight? Where are they at for that? Where are they at suing those guys to make them feel their obligation about water? We don't hear about them fighting for water. We hear them using water to fight against development. So that's the first one. The second one was for sunsetting. Well, let's do this now, or let's not find it consistent because pretty soon FORA will sunset, and this is our last chance to make sure we can put our stamp on what's going on the former Fort Ord. Well, vote for something. Get something done. Part of that is blight removal. It's not just economic development, but what are we doing for blight removal? What are we doing for the road improvement? What are we doing for a whole bunch of other stuff? So for me, it's just pretty simple. Consistency does not mean exactness. It means being consistent. This does not approve any projects. And when we talk about the county board, if the majority of the board felt that it was consistent, that's the county board, you know. But it's up to us now to try to move this forward. So I don't know which way it's going to go, but for us to be kicking this back and forth, like we can't make a decision, that's not a good idea. So I'll just end by, I want to thank the chair for making sure that this process was open and transparent and writing the record for not closing the open hearing appropriately. And there's nothing wrong with that being pointed out, and we'll make the corrections. But I'll just add that to say to our council as we see what we're up against. The public has a right for us to run these meetings in a correct manner. And so your job is to help us do that. We should not have these comments on the record because they're true comments and they were right to point them out. But I know that was oversight on the chair's part, but he's been our leader. He continues to be our leader. He's doing a fantastic job. So no one was trying to close this early. So I'll just stand on that and I'll prepare for the vote.
Thank you, Ian.
Just one last comment.
No, we just one bite at the apple for everybody here. Seeing no new hands coming up, I now call for the roll call vote.
Councilmember Beach? No. Supervisor Calcagno? Chair Edelin?
Aye.
Mayor Gunter?
Aye.
Councilmember Lucius?
Abstain.
Councilmember Morton?
No.
Mayor Pro Tem O'Connell?
No.
Mayor Pro Tem Oglesby?
Aye.
Supervisor Parker?
No.
Mayor Pendergrass?
Yes.
Supervisor Potter? Mayor Rubio?
Yes.
Councilmember Selfridge?
No.
We have a tie 6-6.
Okay, I'm advised by council that we have a tie of 6-6 with one abstention. As such, the motion fails. It will be referred back to Monterey County for revision and resubmission whenever the county wants to bring it forward. I would add that I think Councilwoman Beach had a very good point, had some very good ideas. You may want to talk to her about some of her ideas. Maybe we can pull everybody together on this and get a consensus and come back and get a unanimous approval of the general plan. Thanks to everybody. It was good deliberations, tough subject, and thank you to the county for all the hard work and so forth. We'll see you again. Okay, next item on the agenda is the second vote, approval of the executive officer contract extension. I'm going to go out to the public, see if there's any public comment first. Any member of the public wishing to address this item? Any member of the public wishing to address this item? Seeing none, coming back to the board, does any member of the board wish to make a comment with regard to this item?
Move approval of the item, please.
Okay, we have a motion for approval by Mayor Rubio, and and Mayor Gunter is a second. I don't think we're going to need a roll call vote on this. We have to have a roll call vote. Let's have a roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Beach?
Yes.
Supervisor Calcagno? Chair Edelin?
Yes.
Mayor Gunter?
Yes.
Councilmember Lucius?
Yes.
Councilmember Morton?
No.
Mayor Pro Tem O'Connell?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Oglesby?
Yes.
Supervisor Parker?
No.
Mayor Pendergrass?
Yes.
Supervisor Potter? Mayor Rubio?
Yes.
Councilmember Selfridge?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you very much. Okay, next is a consistency determination, consider certification in whole or in part of Seaside Zoning Code text amendments and use permit for youth hostel located in 4426 Avenue Seaside. Steve Ensley will introduce this.
Just very briefly, for your consideration, another consistency determination. Planner Josh Metz will give a brief overview of the item, and then Seaside staff are also available for answering any questions.
Yeah, thank you, Steve, and members of the board. We're hoping this one is a little smoother than the last one. Basically, the item before you is certifying the text amendment and project entitlements for the American Youth Hostel, which is a project that's been long planned for a parcel up between a parcel up towards the location will be clarified by Seaside staff, but we have gone through, where is it?
6th Avenue,
Right, okay, so we'll go into the detail of its location. We've gone through the certification checklist to match it with the base reuse plan, and the item is included in attachment B in your packet, and we found it consistent on all counts. So I'll hand it over to Rick Medina, who knows the project in great detail, and will be able to provide the geographic context and all the other details of the project. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the board. The project before you, this is, has two components. We have a zoning text amendment for a youth hostel, to add youth hostel into our CMX commercial mixed-use zoning district, and a use permit application, which will be the entitlement for the project. As noted in the background, the project itself became a subject in 1998 with the State Park Public Benefit Conveyance. It was later, in a 2008 series of memorandums, transferred from the Army and State Parks to the city of Seaside upon the conditions and terms that would be developed as a youth hostel. And there was a 30-year lease agreement which was established, which can be renewed by the youth hostel at the end of that 30-year term. The youth hostel provides budget accommodations, common rooms, self-service kitchen, and it has occasional community programs. And as we get through the project site plan, we will discuss some of the common community aspects this project will provide. The American Youth Hostels currently has a operation of a 45-bed in the city of Monterey, and that has been there since 2000. And as part of the process in evaluating the text amendment and the use permit, we did adopt a mitigative negative declaration, which was certified by the City Council on October 3rd. Next slide, please. The project site, this is it's identified in our address as 4420 6th Avenue. This is the area that is bordered by 6th Avenue to the east, Colonel Durham Street to the north. We have Giggling Street to the south, and then we have other abandoned Army barracks and buildings that are to the west. Further to the east, to note, is the location toward the National Monument, and the building that is directly across the street as adjoining land use that's currently in operation is the Department of Defense. And you'll note we did put the Monterey College of Law, which is a use that's further down to the west end. There's also MPC has its police services, and the City of Monterey has its police department located that direction as well. Next slide, please. The existing conditions, there's 4 buildings on the property currently. Start with Building A, which is bordering Colonel Durham. This is was a former regiment headquarters, as identified as Building A. Building B is was a former outpatient medical clinic, and that is parallel to 6th Avenue. Building C, which is situated in the middle of the site, this was the branch exchange. Then we have a Building D, which is situated between Building B and C, and then further to the south is an open space parking lot. Next slide, please. On the overview of the project, this will be developed as a 120-bed youth hostel, which would have common rooms. There would be a common kitchen. There are community rooms within the facility. In this case, they also plan on including a travel store and coffee shop that would service the general public as well as guests. And there's 3 staff apartments for staff that would be on site for day-to-day operations of the youth hostel. Next slide, please. Looking at the development of the site, it's being developed in 5 individual phases. Phase 2 would consist of Building B, which would be developed into a 48-bed youth hostel that would include the manager's quarters would be inside that facility. Under Phase 3, this would take Building C and would move that area, move the manager's quarters into that facility, and they would have common rooms and a common kitchen area that would further expand and serve the facility. Under Phase 3, there are 2 phases, and under Phase 3B, this would involve an addition of a 4th story onto Building A, which would accommodate a total of 72 beds toward the full build-out of 120 beds. And under Phase 4 would involve the additional provision of parking to accommodate the requisite parking as they proceed with each phase. And on Phase 4B, as you can see, situated in the middle of the Building A, B, and C, this is a common amphitheater area where they would facilitate open space activities for guests primarily, and there would be an occasional community event that they would coordinate through the city seaside through limited term permits. Phase 5 would eventually have Building D being relocated to the south end of the facility, where they would have further organic garden activities, meditation garden areas, as well as the possibility of additional wind turbines, which they would put at this location. Note on Building 2, there are 3 wind turbines that were approved under that phase, but we would do further environmental review to determine any further wind turbines in the future. Next slide, please. The required entitlements that what the city went through in this process, first we have a text amendment, which is to include youth hostel as a specific land use in the CMX zoning districts. Under this provision, we required that would process with a conditional use permit. The city did proceed in conjunction with the application to review the use permit, whereby the city council did grant its approval of the use permit and the text amendment. Overall, in its evaluation of the site, they found that the project itself is compatible with nearby uses. It's an infill site, so there's all infrastructure and facilities are there to service the existing site. The site is physically suitable in its density and intensity, and that's what we did provide an analysis in the checklist of the development checklist that's included in the staff report. Also to note, it is complementary in the fact that there's an expansion of open space uses, trails nearby. We find that this can be a destination point for people not only as they stay at the facility, but to frequent and promote the use of those adjoining uses within the Fort Ord the Fort Ord base. The project also has sustainable activities such as catchment of stormwater. There is the wind turbine aspect that's being included as part of the project. And there is a green roof that will be provided on one of the buildings to kind of start to implement and look towards LEED certified activities. Based on that analysis, next slide, please. Is there any questions or comments? Based on that analysis, the City of Seaside concludes and is presenting for the board's consideration this afternoon a consistency determination on the legislative action and the development permit entitlement.
Any member of the board have any questions? Yes, Ralph.
Yeah, I'd just like to say that we've been working with the youth hostel for many years, trying to get this project realized. Mr. Canvas and Melissa back there know them for a long time, and it's a worthwhile project. We've checked all the boxes, and this is ready for action by the board.
Thank you. Out to the public, opening a public hearing. Public hearing's now open. Do we have any comments from the public with regard to this item?
Name is Eric Peterson, and it's been a few years. I'm a former member of American Youth Hostels and even got listed as a contributor to the second North American Bicycle Atlas published by AYH. This is just a dynamite example of what can be done in this area. And this sort of facility attracts people, not just bicyclists, all sorts of people, and it'll just be a really good addition to the area. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next speaker.
Thank you, Chair. Jason Campbell again. This is a really exciting project. As Mr. Medina pointed out, it's very compatible with the other plans for that area, the existing plans, and I think we should move ahead with it as quickly as possible, so please find it consistent.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chair, Molly Erickson, attorney on behalf of Keep Fort Ord Wild and the Open Monterey Project. We join in the support. We are happy to support this very wise and productive use, which both builds on the blight, it draws visitors to our area, and it will provide jobs, all things that are high on the list and very important to this area and this body. At the forum that Director Beach put on in December at CSUMB, I spoke with some of the people who were involved in this project, and it's very exciting, and they pointed out that the existing hostel that it currently exists in New Monterey turned away so many people that it could have filled up this current new proposed youth hostel, which is pretty amazing in that the demand is already there for this use. And so what you're simply doing is providing the supply, so the next step is just bigger and larger. So thank you again. We're very happy to support this action.
Thank you, ma'am.
Von Stone, Fort Ord Environmental Justice Network. This project sounds like it'll turn out to be more like barracks for people that are coming into the community. But what most of the community wants to know is how is this going to benefit them? The local long-term people who live here said that this project would not benefit them. At most, it would be temporary jobs, not long-term livable wage jobs. And the reason is because some of the other projects, such as affordable housing, have been said to been built for the benefit of the people here who need affordable housing, and then when they applied, they were rejected with long, convoluted applications. So the intent and saying that we're going to have jobs for the local community, every project that comes into the community said we're going to have jobs. We are still sitting here waiting on livable wage jobs for the long-time local people who live here. Their children need housing. need jobs, need attention, just like everybody else's children. So when are we going to look at the fact that we still have people, human beings, families, children here that are not being given an opportunity in these processes? I mean, what is the deal when this project is built? How will the question is, how will this benefit the community, the people who live here? We're not just about replacing people in the community. In every community where projects come in, the local people have a say-so. They have an opportunity to really participate and be heard from and to have their needs met. It should be the same thing in this community.
Thank you, ma'am. Any other member of the public wishing to address the board with regard to this item? Seeing none, the public hearing is now closed. Bringing it back to the board. Entertain a motion.
Make a motion.
Mayor Rubio.
Make a motion we find the project consistent.
Okay. And the second is, okay, Councilmember Beach. Any discussion on the motion? We need to make a roll call vote. We're back to roll. There's a new ruling that we have to be able to identify everybody in the way they vote, so it's going to take a little longer here in the future by roll call votes, unfortunately, but that's just the way the law is going. Let's have a roll call.
Particularly today because we have someone participating by phone.
Right.
Councilmember Beach?
Yes.
Supervisor Calcagno?
Yes.
Chair Edelin?
Aye.
Mayor Gunter?
Yes.
Councilmember Lucius?
Yes.
Councilmember Morton?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem O'Connell?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Oglesby?
Yes.
Supervisor Parker?
Yes.
What?
Was that a yes?
Was that a yes?
That was a yes.
That was a yes.
Thank you. Mayor Pendergrass?
Yes.
Supervisor Potter? Mayor Rubio?
Yes.
Councilmember Selfridge?
Yes.
Chair Edelin, the motion passes unanimously.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Next item on the agenda is the appeal for the Marina Coast Water District determination of Bayview Community annexation. Earlier, we received a request from the legal counsel for the Bayview community requesting a 30-day continuance of this item to allow the Marina Coast Water District Board an opportunity to respond to the latest settlement proposal. Both parties are very, very close. We thought they'd be finished by this time, but evidently closed session wasn't able to be conducted before this meeting, so I'm going to grant the 30-day extension to our next board meeting. I think it'll serve all the parties, and I think both parties agree to that. So we appreciate your two parties' willingness to work together on that.
Do you need a motion to continue?
I don't need a motion on that? No motions required. Thanks for checking, though, Ralph. Okay, last month I asked for a presentation by the Marina Coast Water District on the status of water, and they were very responsive, and within 30 days they put together a presentation. Director Tom Moore, one of our fellow compatriots, will be giving the presentation, and we appreciate your cooperation on this and your willingness and you giving the presentation. Thanks, Tom.
You're quite welcome. We were hoping, I don't know, is this on? Yeah, I guess it's on. We were hoping to have our interim general manager, Brian Lee, give this presentation. Unfortunately, he had a conflict that he could not resolve with respect to this presentation, so I was the stuckey that the board sent to talk to you all about this. I'll need the slide. Will it work from there? All right, I want to start with some very brief history about the district and give you a decent sense of what Marina Coast Water District has been doing since it took over the system. So the system technically is the entire Ord community, but as you are well aware, The BLM properties receive no current service, and it's unlikely that they're going to be needing any service in the future. So the work that Marina Coast has done over the last 10 years or so has focused on the already developed areas and some of the redeveloping areas such as East Garrison. Marina Coast is a water district called a county water district under California Special Districts law, and it is authorized to collect revenues from these sorts of sources. Our primary source of revenue is water rates and sewage collection fees, plus fixed meter charges, which pay for costs that don't change with water usage. We own a building or two. We own some equipment that doesn't change with water usage. Occasionally, we have had special surcharges. Currently, one exists in the Ord community for anyone who, any developer who put something in basically after Seaside Highlands was built. There's a $25 a month surcharge, and I'll explain where that comes from in just a few minutes. There's something called capacity charges. I'll cover those for you briefly. We have, over the years, gotten quite a few dollars in state and federal grants. And then for minor things like inspections and plan checks, there are some small service fees. Just some basic statistics for the Ord community. We serve somewhere close to 15,000 people with about 4,000 service connections. You can see in the column labeled total what our overall budget looks like. Roughly 15 million in revenue, roughly 15 million in expenses. This was a couple of fiscal years ago. Some of these figures are just a little bit old. If you really want updates, you'll need to give us another 30 days to pull that together. Net assets, around 130 million, depending on which appraiser you talk to. And we have about 46 million in total debt, about half of which applies, a little more than half applies to the Ord community. We have a total of 8 wells, 5 of which were inherited from the Army or we rebuilt them on former Army land. Central Marina has 3 wells itself that are still operating today. Many of the former Central Marina wells over the years have had to be taken out of service because of seawater intrusion underneath the city. There's 4 sewer lift stations in Central Marina, but 15 on the Ord community as a consequence primarily of the terrain. There were a lot of housing areas built that had basins in them, and most wastewater flows downhill, but if it goes into a basin, you really don't want the basin to fill up with wastewater, so you have to pump out of that basin, thus 15 of those. And just a comment on lift stations, wastewater lift stations. They're fairly expensive to build new. They're about $1 million a piece. And if you think about it, they have to be able to handle not just the wastewater, but the little rubber ducky toy that the child threw into the toilet that gets flushed down. And you don't want pumps and things breaking when that happens. Right? About 170 miles of water pipe on the Ord community, some of which is quite old water pipe, asbestos cement, for example, which is known for leaking on occasion, and about 113 miles of sewer collection pipe, wastewater pipe. That has been one of the serious challenges we've faced over the years, because when they closed the former Fort Ord, sewage flows in that 113 miles of wastewater collection pipe in a lot of places decreased to near zero. The problem is it doesn't completely go to zero. There's infiltration from leaks and roots growing into pipes and maybe a few users remaining. And when you have very small flows in steel pipe, one thing that occurs is sulfuric acid fumes form in the air above those low flows and start corroding metal pipe. One of the projects we had to do more or less on an emergency basis was to figure out how to reline the pipe that goes under Highway 1 near Seaside Highlands before it breached Highway 1. We think that you all would have been very unhappy with us had we had to close Highway 1 for a couple of weeks to trench through it and fix the pipe. We managed to fix this in place. We did a similar project to provide fire flows to the UCM Best. We were able to put substantial new water pipe under Reservation Road without closing down Reservation Road or even cutting through it. But that does cost money. Okay. Some of the significant projects, we've replaced 3 wastewater lift stations, refurbished another 3 of those 15. As I say, replacement's probably about $1 million project. We had to reconfigure much of the potable water system. The old Army system pumped from its 4 wells, which are out Reservation Road towards East Garrison and at fairly high elevation, pumped untreated well water downhill basically into the western portion of what's now known as the Marina Heights development, into something called the sand tank, treated it all there, and then had to pump it back uphill all across the former Fort Ord. Very wasteful of energy, not exactly an industry standard construction, and we had to reconfigure all of that, which took some doing. We removed the old gaseous chlorination systems, which can be dangerous if they leak, and replaced them with a chlorination system that makes hypochlorite from salt on site. So your tank sites and places where we do chlorination are considerably safer now. There were 2 elevated storage tanks, one at Frishy Army Airfield, and one at Site D, which is in Seaside. These were large masses of water elevated. I'll show you a picture in just a moment, and not seismically safe. We had to take those down, but you still need the storage that was there, so we had to replace those with new storage tanks. I'll show you a couple of photos in just a moment. We also did, if that isn't enough to be doing over the last decade, we did a programmatic level EIR for the Regional Urban Water Augmentation Program, which I'll talk about in a few minutes. We also tried to develop the regional desalination project in partnership with the county and Cal-Am. I'm sure you're well aware of some of the aftermath of that, and I'll have a comment about that in just a moment. We did have to replace a Ord well that had become defective. We just re-drilled in a similar location and deeper. We also put a new well in to serve not just East Garrison, but the rest of the system. It's out by a place called Watkins Gate. You can see it if you drive Reservation Road towards Salinas once you get down into the valley. So there's the old D site tank. You can see that's up in the air pretty high, a good shaker, and that might be landing on somebody's head. The new facility, you see immediately below that, we put in a pump station and a tank and a potential second tank. There's space there in the acreage. We put pipeline into General Jim Moore Boulevard. You'll notice that's purple pipeline in anticipation of the possibility of delivering reclaimed water to that part of the Ord community. So let me digress a moment and talk about capacity charges, because capacity charges are the way that normally most water districts across the country pay for new projects to support new development. And capacity charges are calculated by engineering firms that do rate studies with 2 components. There is a component to pay for any development, any work that the water district has to do to increase the system capacity as a consequence of having the new development. If the new development doubles the number of houses, you might need a new well. You might need new water lines to go from that well to wherever that development is. So there's a component in the capacity charge that's connected with that. There's a second component that is essentially a buy-in by that new development into the existing water and wastewater system, which prior to that new development has all been paid for by existing customers. All right. Normally, these 2 components are calculated, added up, and that becomes the capacity charge. It's usually expressed on the basis of an equivalent dwelling unit, which is one typical single-family home. All right. So I apologize for, if I'd known the projector was going to be a little bit out of focus, I would have made those figures bigger. At the request of a prior board, back about 2002, Marina Coast Water District was asked to not have any capacity charges at all. So you ask, if you had to do all this work to improve the system and make it ready for new development, who's paying for that? Well, the idea back then was that our rate base was going to increase so rapidly that we could get this money in ordinary rates from existing folks with no capacity charges. That system lasted till about 2005, when the water district saw that that rate base increase was pretty much flatlined and that the revenues were not coming in to pay for all these projects. And eventually Mike Armstrong convinced the Water and Wastewater Oversight Committee, which in turn convinced the FORA board, that we needed capacity charges. But in the process of that negotiation with the developers were very unhappy about the numbers that came out of the calculation that you saw on the previous slide. So the compromise was to create half capacity charges, which is the $3,300 you see on the slide starting in 2006, and institute a $25 a month surcharge on each new person. Now, Seaside Highlands was built, no surcharge, no capacity charge, then pretty much nothing happened through much of this time frame. There's been some movement recently, and those folks are all paying this $25 a month surcharge for about 30 years. I will tell you, though, that that is an administrative nightmare because we have to keep them distinct from Seaside Highlands. We have to keep track of the 30 years on an individual basis. We'd love to see that go away. You might understand why we're proposing some new capacity charges, and we're in negotiations with the Water and Wastewater Oversight Committee in that regard. Okay, so what have we done in terms of dollars? Because you all think about things in dollars, so do we. You can see what we've spent in capital improvements for basically the past 5 years. I didn't want to make the chart too cluttered, so I didn't go back prior to 2008. And just the total of those past 5 years is $27 million, making improvements and changes both to make our system come into compliance with various codes, our own codes, state and national codes, and also to set this system up for the future growth that you all have laid out in the base reuse plan. In addition, we've spent about $18.4 million pursuing the regional desal project, which was intended, from our perspective, to be able to provide the future 2,400 acre feet that the base reuse plan calls for over and above the 6,600 acre feet of groundwater. And let me make a side comment about the 6,600 acre feet of groundwater. That was a result of an agreement between the Army and the County Water Resources Agency. One of the terms of that agreement is that the County Water Resources Agency will work diligently to create a project that is a new source of water so that the Army, in this agreement, would no longer have to rely on groundwater. For whatever reasons, that has not yet happened, but that is something that could still happen. But we'll get to the big question on one of my last slides about that and other things. All right. In the meantime, Marina Coast Water District never wanted to take on the allocation process for that 6,600 acre feet of groundwater. I believe FORA may actually hold title to most of that 6,600 acre feet, except for perhaps the part that's still reserved by the United States Army. FORA went through a process of suballocating that to the various land use jurisdictions and land use entities such as CSUMB on the former Fort Ord. That was a process that a prior board went through. And this slide shows you city by city what those allocations were. So the height of the bar, ignoring the colors for the moment, shows what each land use jurisdiction got in terms of an allocation by the FORA board. The blue part of the bar is a combination of what that land use jurisdiction is using today of that groundwater, of their allocation in the Ord community, and also what they have entitled, what they have promised to existing entitled projects. So you can see that City of Marina, the leftmost bar, has very little left to entitle anything else, to do anything else. City of Seaside has some left, looks to be a couple hundred acre feet, and that actually was recognized in the water supply assessment that was done about a little less than a year and a half ago for Monterey Downs, for example. Some of these land use jurisdictions have substantial amounts of uncommitted water, and some don't. all right? But I want to emphasize that the allocations and those commitments are decisions of land use jurisdictions. Here's what you're using, actually, of the 6,600 acre feet. The red line represents 6,600 acre feet per year of water. The blue line is the total of what all those land use jurisdictions are currently using. You're a little under 1/3 of the way there. I ran a little regression analysis, a trend analysis, to see how much this is growing. Granted, the trend probably won't remain exactly the same, but if the trend were to remain the same as you see here, that blue line will reach the red line in about 155 years. So here's what's happened to the rates on the Ord community. You'll note on the left side there's just a green line and a red line, and that's for the years preceding the establishment of that surcharge that I spoke of earlier. The surcharge is $20 for water and $5 for wastewater. Right, so the green line is wastewater rates, and when you get to that yellow line, the yellow line represents what you pay for wastewater plus the surcharge to pay for part of the capacity charge over a 30-year period. The red line is the water rate, and the gray line is the sum of the water rate plus the $20 surcharge to pay for water capacity development, instead of collecting up front a capacity charge from the developers. These figures, by the way, are based on what we typically see a dwelling unit, an equivalent dwelling unit, using in terms of 100 cubic feet. Typical dwelling units using about 1,300 cubic feet. And please don't confuse HCF with the figures that CalAm uses. CalAm doesn't use HCF, they use 10 cubic feet, or they use gallons, which are two different numbers. It's very easily confused if you're going to try and compare rates. So the water rates in Central Marina and the wastewater rates, the water rates are actually a little higher in Central Marina. The wastewater rates are considerably lower, and that traces back, for example, to having to replace or refurbish a whole bunch of lift stations and those projects we had to do to repair existing in-place sewer lines that had deteriorated, in particular during the period when there was very little going on the base after the Army left. All right, some of the challenges. First of all, there's seawater intrusion that unfortunately continues into that groundwater basin, which is the source of the 6,600 acre feet. We have to fix that, and when I say we, that has to be a partnership involving the Monterey County Water Resources Agency, Marina Coast Water District, and all of the other users who rely on that water, and that's a tough nut to crack. And again, the second bullet says, right now, other than our very small, completely mothballed 300 acre foot per year desalination plant, our only source of water is that Salinas Valley groundwater basin. Another challenge for us is an open question. What happens when FORA goes away in 2020? Our contract to serve outside our district is with the Fort Ord Reuse Authority. Who will hold the other side of that contract at that point? Or will there be a necessity for it? Those are open questions and challenges. The growth projection issue. We relied early on, having no capacity charges, on a growth prediction from FORA, prior board, that didn't occur. And we've continued to see lack of growth, a little bit of movement in just recent times as the economy's gotten a bit better. And then, of course, a big challenge for us that is only tangentially related to the Ord community, in that the $18 million we spent on the regional desalination project was in part intended so that we would be in a position when you needed it to provide 2,400 acre feet of desalinated water. Now, our position, by the way, is that if CalAm and the county would care to do whatever actions they need to take to come back to that contract, it's a valid contract, and the judges have said it's a valid contract. We'd start building that project tomorrow if folks would come back to the table and join that contract again. Some more challenges. Well, you're asking for additional sources of water. So in the past year, we've been looking into a variety of things. We certainly could go back to the RUAP. I'll cover a couple of the high points in this regard, but they're fairly limited choices. seawater potentially could be desalinated. Although you might think there's an unlimited amount of seawater out there, which is probably a true statement, we don't have unlimited access to it, and we don't have unlimited ability to dispose of the brine that comes out of a desalination project. For instance, if CalAm does in fact build a desalination project with intake wells just north of our office building on the CMEX project, they will be pulling some 20,000 acre-feet of water from whatever aquifer they tap. And they'll be making about 10,000, roughly, acre-feet of desalinated potable water and using the other 10,000 acre-feet to dispose of all the salt that's been taken out of that potable water. So that's one possibility. Another possibility is to capture and treat surface waters from the Salinas River, which has some pros and cons. And lastly, reclaiming water from wastewater. Another challenge is we still haven't replaced all of the aging infrastructure on the Ord community, and we actually should be putting more money away to pay for that in the future than we are currently, but that's connected, for instance, with being out $18 million with respect to the regional desalination project. So we could go back to the original RUAP project, which was approved about 2005 by this board and by Marina Coast Water District. It consisted of 1,200 acre-feet of desalinated water and 1,200 acre-feet of reclaimed water. Why two different sources? Simply to have diversity of sources. Okay, some problems with respect to this today. We don't have 1,200 acre-feet of demand for reclaimed water for irrigation purposes. The big customers in the Ord community, Bayonet and Black Horse, maybe 500 or 600 acre-feet a year. It's only about half of that 1,200 acre-feet. Are there other places? Yeah, but they tend to be small, number one. And number two, you have to put purple pipe in the ground to reach all of them. And putting more pipe in the ground is expensive. So what would RUAP look like? And I have to warn you that these two figures are from engineering studies that are now about 6 years old. For recycled water, maybe $40 million. And for desal, about $32 million, for a total of about $72 million. Once you create a project like that, if you operate it, it's going to have ongoing higher operating costs, higher than, say, pumping water from a well that is tapped into the Salinas Valley groundwater basin. How much higher? This, our engineering staff thinks about 3.5 times higher on an ongoing basis. It's one reason why we turned off our 300 acre-foot desalination plant after running it for a year or two to make sure it worked fine. It was costing us $25,000 a month just in electricity to make water for that. Why should we pay $25,000 a month to run that plant when we can pump an equal amount of groundwater with about $500 worth of electricity on the well pumps? To do RUAP would require significant cooperation from the Monterey Regional Water Pollution Control Agency, particularly for the reclaimed water portion. We have rights to get reclaimed water from their plant, but we haven't exercised those rights to date. And in order to exercise those rights, we'd have to go through the specific negotiations of how to connect up to their project and their plant. Secondly, with respect to the desal project, we have an agreement with the Monterey Regional Water Pollution Control Agency to dispose of brine through their outfall, but that still would need some fairly hefty technical lifting to get that to work to everyone's satisfaction. In addition, we really don't know whether or not the CalAm desal project is going to be built. Is it going to be built with its intake wells on the CMEX property? How many intake wells do you need to pull up 20,000 acre-feet a year from those aquifers? And what influence would that have on Marina Coast Water District's ability to put intake wells perhaps in the same general area? I don't know the answer to those questions, but those questions do need to be answered, and they're serious questions as to whether or not CalAm's desal project might interfere. Another thing that's been going on with respect to reclaimed water is that CalAm and others in the county have been doing a good job convincing folks to use less water. Don't waste so much water. Get low-flow commodes. But what does that do to wastewater flows? It decreases them, which decreases the availability of water to reclaim in the first place, to use for irrigation or any other purpose. All right. Another possibility would be try and go all desal. Well, it certainly puts all your eggs in one basket. Estimated cost about $60 million, and again, this is a ballpark figure. Operating costs about 4 times compared to well water from the Salinas Valley groundwater basin. And certainly if we have to pull up, well, let's see, 2 times 2,400 is 4,800 acre feet per year of seawater or brackish water near the ocean, while Cal-Am is pulling up 20,000 acre feet of water in a similar location. I don't know what that means, but potentially it could mean something. And then you're still going to have to now put 2,400 acre feet a year of brine back into the ocean, which currently we believe we would do via the Monterey Regional Water Pollution Control Agency outfall. Last project we've been looking into to try and investigate everything that we possibly can is the possibility of using some water from the Salinas River during high flow times. It's in very conceptual stages. We have no EIR for that. This ballpark estimate is very much a ballpark estimate. But if you think about it, if you want to get a significant amount of water during high flow times, you have to build a fairly high capacity plant. You either have to have a place to store that water or enough users to use it while you make it. And then you have to turn the plant off when the river flows get too low. And the plant just sits there. Well, it's doing one important thing while it's sitting there. It's consuming your capital and interest payments. So there's that issue. And of course, it's certainly tied heavily to timing of flows in the river and maybe drought conditions that come along for a couple of years. All right, so last of all, the biggest challenge and the one you face. If you want 2,400 acre feet of new water now, who's going to pay for it? The developers could. If Brian Boudreau wants to write us a check for $40 million, I think we could get to work tomorrow building things for him. Maybe you want to say current and future customers are going to pay for that. Well, we've got about 6,000 or so future customers, at least entitled at this point, plus about 4,000 existing. That's about 10,000 customers. So that'd be about $7,500 per account, not counting interest charges, because nobody has this amount of money sitting in their back pocket. You have to borrow from somewhere. Could we do current customers, make current customers pay for all this? I guess you could try and get $18,000 per customer account out of each customer, plus interest charges going forward. I would say politically, good luck with that. And of course, you can try and go to government. FORA is government, grants, no interest loans, maybe land use jurisdictions. Marina Coast Water District's open to getting revenue from any of these sources to build this if you want it built now. But of course, you're going to have to pay attention to the fact that you're only using 1/3 of your groundwater at the present time. And to build new expensive water that costs 3.5 to 4 times as much to operate going forward. Realistically, if somebody gave us the money to build a 2,400 acre foot desalination project and you all insisted we do it now, we would build that project, we'd build it now, we'd test it, make sure it's running, and then we'd shut it down for 15 years until we got close to the 6,600 acre feet of groundwater being used up by your customers on the former Fort Ord, because it would be foolish to do anything else, to keep operating a desalination project when you still have access to that groundwater. So, that being said, I'll take your questions.
Tom, thank you very much. Excellent presentation. Mayor Rubio?
Yes, thank you, Tom. That was a very comprehensive and complete presentation, but it raises more questions than it does give answers. I can see why, maybe folks at Marina Coast Water would rather not do anything. Throwing your hands up in the air and saying, well, it's too hard, it's too expensive, who needs it? It all sounds good, I guess. Only problem is that we need it. 215 acre feet is what Seaside has left of our allocation. 215, and we're going to burn that up pretty quickly. We're moving. We're getting things done, and I anticipate that Marina's going to do the same thing, and I think they've got even less left in their allocation. So people are going to need the water. And is it foolish to develop a water source in a really water-constricted area? I'm sure that if you had the water, someone would come along and buy it. There's no lack of water customers in this area. I'm concerned by a couple of things. I've been getting communications from some of your board members that, and I'm not sure if it's a position of the board, but it does cause pause on my end of it, because it gets very close to breach of contract with the Fort Ord Reuse Authority. Now, you talked about the General Jim Moore, putting in the pipeline. That's all great, but a lot of that was covered by grants. And, not enough customers. Well, like you mentioned, Bayonet Black Horse, that's, up to 500 acre feet. And don't forget the Highlands project down there. It's already purple piped. You got purple pipe all over Marina in the Imjin Parkway and some of those other areas in the new developments. So, I mean, if you were to supply recycled water, you would find the customers. The RUOP, that was what we were anticipating here in Fort Ord, was a RUOP project. If you can't do that, well, then there's got to be some other way to do it. $25,000 per month. I know that PCA put in a huge solar array to take care of some of their energy needs. Has that been contemplated by your board? I'm not hearing any proactive moves by the Marina Coast board that would address what we're looking for. And if you wait till the moment that you need the water, it takes you 10 years to get a project going. If you started now, you might be ready in time for when we need it. The other thing is, you say you put all your eggs in one basket. You don't have any eggs. You don't even have a basket right now, and that really bothers me. And one thing that in this area we talk about is water needs, but we also talk very heavily about water conservation. And you didn't mention that at all as a priority for this board, for the Marina Coast Water District. Where's your conservation effort? Where's your, the rest of the world around here uses the calculation of 4 single-family dwellings per acre foot. Marina Coast Water uses 3. Why is that? Because there's no conservation. There's no attempt at conservation. I don't see anything here about policies on conservation. That's a way of creating a new source of water. So I'm sorry. I really am not accepting the posture that the board is taking of not being able to. I think it's more of not wanting to. And I really hope that this is just a moment in time snapshot of the status and not what we're going to be looking at into the future. Thank you.
Could you repeat your question?
The question? No, I didn't say I had a question. That's my comments.
Okay, thank you.
And we can get funny and kind of snarky about this if you want.
Okay, that's fine. Other questions by board members? Yes, sir.
I have several questions. One is on that trend, the time series that you have on page 7. Just eyeballing that, it looks like your trend coefficient is not statistically different from 0, right?
It's pretty close to that.
So, anytime if you have some new development activity, that could change.
That could change, absolutely, okay. And we hope it will.
The other question I had was when you mentioned that the Fort Ord reuse plan calls for 2,700 acre feet per year more water than is available. What is the total available? Is it the 60? I'm not quite sure. You have a Fort Ord allocation of 6,600. Is that number 2,700 more than what's available?
The 2,700. Okay, the base reuse plan calls for 9,000 acre feet in total. That was an estimate done back in 1997. All right, 6,600 acre feet of groundwater. The difference is 2,400. The reason the 27 is in there is we were anticipating replacing with RUOP or whatever desal was built, that 300 acre feet additional capacity would be built into that plant to replace our existing mothballed 300 acre foot plant to get economies of scale off of that.
Okay. I have two observations. One sort of leans in one direction, the other one leans in another direction. First observation is if you took out the Army allocation from the slide on page 6, as well as the CSUMB allocation, and you just looked at the remaining allocations, you'd have a much higher utilization rate than 1/3, right? That would be pretty tight already. That seems to be where the comments are coming from.
Are you counting usage or usage plus entitlements?
Usage plus entitlements.
Okay.
Yeah. So do you have any idea what it would be if you pulled out CSUMB and
Haven't done those figures, but it would be considerably higher. That's correct. As a consequence of the land use jurisdictions not having much left that they haven't either used or entitled.
And then another observation on the other side is there. I guess it's a question, which is, do you or anybody else have any sense of whether the Army is ever likely to make serious inroads into its unused allocation?
I think we'd have to turn to our Army representative for an answer to that question.
So I'd tell you at this point, there are no plans to dig into that, but I will certainly bring that to the board if we ever do. Right now, there's nothing planned at Port Ord.
Okay. So I guess that raises a theoretical possibility that water could, under the right set of circumstances, become available to us.
Possibility. Great idea. Other questions by board members, comments? Mayor Gunter.
I know that we're always considered the agency on this board that has no skin in the game, especially from several of the members, but I noticed that you're getting all your water from Salinas Valley groundwater basin, and saltwater intrusion is moving rather quickly. Can you tell me where your next well is going to be on Reservation Road when it gets there? How far are you going to go to Spreckles to get your water?
Hopefully we don't have to
pretty much to make sure Marina and Fort Ord has water. I just want to know where you're going because, you know, what are your plans?
We can't say at this point that we have a specific plan to move further up the valley. We just built the Watkins Gate well. It has substantial capacity to it. It was more than $1 million project to get capacity out of that. Across all of our wells, we currently have the ability to extract 6,600 acre feet a year. If we got to that point, would we want some more wells for redundancy purposes? Because 6,600 acre feet a year would begin to approach the capacity of those wells that we have collectively. So we'd probably want to put in another well, and yeah, you'd go further up the valley. Now, on the other hand, the County Water Resources Agency, which has substantial interest from the ag community on its board, in its agreement with the Army, basically said you can take water from the Salinas Valley groundwater basin up to that amount until we get you a substitute project. I don't know if that answers your question, Mayor Gunter.
Oh, that answers my question.
Okay. Supervisor Calcagno.
Again, you know, I brought it to your attention at the last meeting, and it still when for any development at FORA, at the present time, the water's coming out of the Salinas Basin. And you're going up further up the Salinas Valley to get your water. They have to. They know that because of saltwater intrusion. What is happening, you're blocking the water when you do that. You're taking it from the community of Castroville and you're taking it from North County. You're basically growing on the backs of someone else's water. Now, yes, when we made those agreements back years ago, we all had allocations. The allocations that I have is pure salt right now. So you're going to give me allocations? Where am I going to go? Dig a well in Spreckles and run a line 20 miles to get my water? The issue is the basin is running short of water. It's overdrafted. There's no more water. And if any development in Fort Ord is going to take water out of that basin, you're asking for a fight. And it started halfway today. What I want to see out of our general plan is there's not an adequate supply of water in the 2C basin. When I see that, you can do all the development you want at Fort Ord. But right now, we don't have no water in that basin. Our people are running short every day. The saltwater's intrusion, if any of you know where Cooper Road is, it's about 7-8 miles in. It's already there. And if it wasn't for CSIP irrigating that would all be foul land. It is moving beyond that and stretching towards Blanco Road. So just keep pulling out of that basin and kill an agriculture economy. Yes, you should be developing FORA, but you should develop a water supply first. And maybe we should be sitting here discussing how to develop the water supply, and then when we have it, talk about developing projects.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments by board members? Ian, please.
I'll be quick, and that's why I asked for us to be on the agenda, so we can talk about water. If FORA is going to be, this regional partner and try to, excuse me, plan these regional projects, then we just can't say we don't have water. What are we going to do to provide water? What are we going to do to make water? And maybe we can put that on our agenda. Maybe we can work with Marina Coast, and I thank you, Tom, for the presentation, but the question is water. We just want to throw up our hands and say there's no water, and then FORA says don't pass the general plan because there's no water. Well, what are we doing to get water for Fort Ord properties? I mean, if we're going to supervise the development of Fort Ord, then we should talk about how to get the water. And if it's not there, then let's just agree that it's not there.
Good point. Thank you. Any other member of the board wishing to? Okay, please.
The comments that were made so far, I sort of raised questions in my mind. I mean, there seems to be a disconnect between these allocations and the presumed reserves of water that we have and the observation by the supervisor. Does that mean that well before we run into this alleged capacity that we have, we're going to actually experience a salination problem? Is that the issue? That in fact these numbers are not realistic, that they should be scaled back? I mean, what's the answer to that?
You've got a regional problem here. We're legally entitled to 6,600 acre feet. Nobody can stop us from pulling 6,600 acre feet out of the ground. But like North County, they're going to salt. We've got areas of the Marina Coast Water District that's going to salt. The peninsula right now, we're fighting for water. Everybody's fighting for water. The only way this is going to be solved is FORA is not going to sit there and pull all of our resources into producing water where nobody else is. We may need a regional plan, very much like the Monterey Peninsula mayors have come together and come up with a solution with Cal-Am to produce water for the Monterey Peninsula. Maybe we need North County, FORA, and Salinas to come together with a regional plan where we're all sharing the overall solution. Because FORA by itself is not going to give up 6,600 acre feet. The North County is not going to give up any of their allocations. Salinas definitely isn't. You couldn't expect anyone to unless we have a regional plan. So we're going to need a leader to, Lou, maybe you as a supervisor, to pull together a task force to take a look at how we can solve this problem. Because until we get a regional plan, it's not going to be solved. That's the bottom line. Yes, Ralph.
That's exactly my point. And my issue with the Marina Coast Water, they're our water purveyor. They're charged with bringing us that water. Now, they don't seem to think that we're up against a wall with that number, but I do. I think they need to be planning right now for that water, for that augmented water supply, that 2,700 acre feet that we need. We need to start planning that now. That should be well into the planning phases and talking about EIR specific projects, because we're up against it now. It's not some far away number. That's something that we need to do now. We really need our vendor, our purveyor of water, to step up to the plate and get that done.
I'm going to agendize for the next executive committee meeting a look at the various alternatives this board has as far as producing water and maybe going into partnerships regionally to see what we can do. So that'll be on our next. Ralph, thank you for bringing that up. Yes, Tom.
Just a couple of final comments, and I do want to apologize to Mayor Rubio for perhaps sounding a little obnoxious. You did have a couple of questions embedded. One question was, what has Marina Coast Water District been doing about water conservation? We actually established the first Water Conservation Commission in the county. We have been doing the same sorts of things that Cal-Am is doing in terms of subsidies for low-flow toilets, for taking out turf and replacing it with artificial or drought-tolerant plantings. So we have a number of programs that have been active. You are correct that homes in the Cal-Am service area on average use about 0.25 acre-feet of water per year, and homes in the marina service area use about 0.3 acre-feet of water per year, acre-feet. And it's probably a consequence of the fact that the Cal-Am service area, being served by the Carmel River, went through 2 major droughts over 20 years or so, droughts which didn't really affect Marina Coast Water District and the marina area because we have groundwater, which is not so much affected by droughts. It's affected by other important things. We also have looked into solar arrays and methane for powering, at least in part, desalination projects. Our prior general manager held discussions with the regional environmental park folks about exactly that. I do want to make a comment. Our council has advised us that the 6,600 acre-feet in these agreements that FORA holds title to is not 100% secure. As you know, Seaside Basin went through an adjudication not too long ago, and all of the users in the Seaside Basin were ordered to cut back their usage. If the Salinas Valley groundwater basin were to ever be adjudicated, we can't predict what might come out of that process, and would FORA still hold 6,600 acre-feet of groundwater rights? I don't know the answer to that question. I do want to say that our board be happy to do projects, but FORA has got to be a partner and figure out how to pay for these. It's not like Marina Coast Water District has $40 million sitting in reserves that it could throw at a project like this. And when you go out to the bond market to borrow money for that, the bond market wants to know what revenue stream do you have that's a pretty certain revenue stream that will pay for all of this. Absent that, we can be critical of Marina Coast Water District as your purveyor here all we want, but without the money, we can't do the projects. And so together, we've got to figure that out. So, thank you, Chair Adlin.
And thank you for your apology. That's very professional of you. Let's go out to the public. Any member of the public have any questions or comments with regard to this item? Sir.
Ken Nishi, I'm a resident of Marina.
Right.
Excuse me?
The mic, please. We can't hear you.
Got a tall guy ahead of me. I'm, as some of you know, served on the Marina Coast Water Board for a long time. Mayor Rubio hit the nail on the head. Basically, you have academia, comes with a nice blue sport coat, and a common person that wears his blue vest. The problem is, when I left the board, we had a 3,000 acre-foot desalination plant, excuse me, in place that was going to have water flowing by 2015 for that water augmentation. This present board used that mentality, but she told you, well, who's going to put up the money to build this? We had the financing, everything ready to go, and they killed it. So that's one of the facts. Another fact is the previous board understood that agriculture in the Salinas Valley was the #1 economic driver. Agriculture needs less expensive water than urban areas. We understood that. We understood that when the CSIP project in Castroville was originally envisioned there was two parts, the portion for the farmers and a second portion, potable water for Marina and the former Fort Ord. And because of the financing, we couldn't do both. Fort Ord and Marina Coast gave the buy-in costs to the county so they can move ahead with the CSIP project. And one other thing, Marina Coast has always been a good neighbor to the farmers. We've given we're the only one in the PCA that has rights to the recycled water back. And we've given that water to the farmers, I don't know, close to 20 years. No charge. You need to use it.
30 seconds, please.
30 seconds. I don't think I want to make it. When you bring it up again, I'll be here. And the desal plant would have had water flowing by 2015. So you wouldn't have to worry about what you're asking. So I have concerns on what this board's doing. Ralph, excuse me, Mayor Rubio hit the nail on the head, and Mr. Sorry, Orientals have a hard time with this Spanish language. So,
Thank you, time.
right, time.
Thank you, Ken. Thanks for your support of the board, too.
Thank you. Tom Mancini, over the years I've been monitoring the water situation on the former Fort Ord. Granted, when Seaside got its first allocation, the first 120 acre feet from Seaside's water went to Sun Bay Apartments, written in the transfer agreement. Along came Mr. Rhoda with his 220 some odd mobile homes, and it was reported by the Public Works Department on the former Public Works, who was monitoring the water over there, that he used 46 acre feet. That was 1996, 97, 98. Sometime or other, he turned the spigot on out there, and I think one year it went up to about 100 and, what was it, about 140, 150? And I talked to Colonel Derrick, Jerry Smith and I and Colonel Dawson and Colonel Derrick got together, and we were able to negotiate a 38 acre transfer from the Army's allocation, Colonel, so that Mr. Rhoda wanted to develop, it wouldn't come from Seaside's allocation. Over the years, Seaside uses 0.21 acre feet per house per dwelling unit, which gives us 4 houses. Marina uses, I think, 0.35. The Army uses 0.50 per dwelling unit. And part of the problem is that some of these houses aren't metered. So really, Marina Coast Water District can't really tell you how much water is actually being consumed. I don't know how many unmetered houses you have over there, Colonel. I know there's a few. The new ones have them, but the old ones don't. And that means probably 1,500, maybe 1,200 homes are unmetered. And, to take a look at their rates, too. You can live in a 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom, 2-bath unmetered home and pay $75 a month. I'm using that as an example. And right next to you have a metered house where there's a family of 3-bedroom, 2-bath, and only paying $35 a month. So all these unmetered homes are really, you don't have track of how much water you can use. I've never seen a report which actually, and I watch your W2, your W4 form, which reports all the water allocations when you come for your annual. I've never really seen how much water every agency has used. So there's really no way of telling how much water is really available.
30 seconds.
I know. I just want to let you know that I still think you need to tell how many gallons are in one HCF. I think it's, 780 gallons per HCF? Because people don't run around
10 seconds.
HCFs. They run around using gallons. So, Colonel, if you want to know more about the water, I got letters going back to '94 that you might be interested in.
Thank you, sir. Any other members of the public wishing to address the board on this item? Seeing none, comment period's closed. I see no other comments. This is an information, okay, here we go. Saving the best for last again.
No, I'm sorry. Just quickly, I just wanted to put on the record for the board, we just seen the circle I've been talking about.
Right.
Mr. Moore gave an excellent presentation, but at the end he said it's hard for them to go out and get a bond to build these infrastructure when there's no development on the scene to pay for it. We just voted down the general plan because opponents of it said, well, you guys anticipate some type of particular project that's going to pay for the water. So we're in a cycle, and we don't know how to get out because we want to be too cute about it, and we should just go ahead and step off of it and allow some development to happen to pay for the water so we all are not fighting for water for the next 20 years. So the facts were put on the table. The reason they can't go out and get a bond because there's no development going on.
Vicious do loop. Okay, again, this is an information item. We'll deem it received. Next item on the agenda is the FORA 2013-14 mid-year budget. Mr. Inslee will take us through that.
Members of the board, you were provided with a PowerPoint, but I think in the interest of time, I'm just going to try and distill down to the items that are being requested tonight. The action tonight is a mid-year budget adjustment, I guess you might call it. We will be bringing back the next year's budget, the fiscal 14-15 budget in May. So we'll be back in 2 months, and that means we'll be back before the Finance Committee next month to discuss all that. So what we wanted to just show you very quickly, and hopefully Jen can just keep up with me as I go through it, just an overview of revenues and expenditures on the first page, and there is a slight change that we're going to want to be making in terms of the expenditure side of the ledger. And we're also just acknowledging, as was discussed with the Finance Committee, that revenues for developer fees and land sale revenues have come in lower than projected, which was part and parcel of the last discussion and the economic situation. On the second slide, we just detail that out, and the basic bottom line is that we just would carry over the budgeting process into the 14-15 budget and not undertake expenditures that we had planned to do in this current 13-14 budget year. So there's no issue of actual cash crunch or anything in that respect. But we just simply won't do some of the things that we were hoping to do in this fiscal year. So we'll be back in May to discuss that. The Finance Committee did indicate, and the board has been on record as well last year, asking us to take a look at the process by which the Administrative Committee does its projections of revenue so that we can come a little closer to targeted projections as we go along. So we'll report back to you in that respect. So moving to the next slide, what we're asking for today is to approve an additional $18,000 in expenditures, $12,500 of which were related to the Veteran Cemetery project, additional title and legal expenses that were incurred, so we have to adjust the budget in order to be commensurate with those actions. And then also, ironically, $5,500 additional dollars to improve our phone line system in this building and teleconferencing capability as well. And that, in a nutshell, is the motion, is to approve $18,000 in additional expenditures and accept the fiscal year 13-14 mid-year budget report, understanding that the 14-15 budget will come back in May.
Before we go to the discussion, I'm informed by our council that we need a motion to extend our meeting past 5 o'clock. I don't anticipate it going much longer. I'm going to ask the board to move one of the items that we're coming up to next month, so it should be a much shorter period. Can I have a motion to extend the meeting, let's say 15 minutes?
Also, second.
Okay, Councilmember Lucius is primary and Councilmember Morton for second. Thank you very much. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Anybody opposed? Thank you. We should be done in 15 minutes. Okay, any discussion or any questions of Steve with regard to the mid-year budget? Yes, Councilmember Lucius.
Thank you. Steve, I just wonder if you can clarify, because both in the report and on the slide, it references a total of 54,000 of increased total expenditures, but you only mentioned 18,000.
Well, Ivana will have to help me on the addition up to 54, but I was just mentioning the specific projects.
I don't want to say the wrong dollar amount. Where is the slide? 36,000 was approved already by the board by previous actions. These actions are listed for you in the board report in itemized expenditures and the itemized expenditures chart. The board previously approved 11,000 for contract for county election legal advice and 25,000 for financial consultants. So those were done previously. So from that total, we're asking only for the difference.
Thank you. That's sufficient.
Okay. Any other questions by board members? Seeing none, out to the public. Any questions by members of the public? Seeing none, back to the board. Entertain a motion, please. Mayor Gunter is moving the staff recommendation.
Second.
And we have a second by Mayor Pro Tem Oglesby. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Anybody opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. This next item is basically an information item. There's not a lot of there's no time element with regard to it. The base reuse plan, implementation, regional urban design guidelines, and I'd like to have some detailed discussion. I'd like, with the board's permission, I'd like to delay this until next month when we have more time to discuss it, considering the hour right now and we're losing daylight. Any member of the board have any objections to delaying this for 1 month?
Move to continue.
Okay, we have a motion. Second. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Anybody opposed? Thank you very much, board. They'll get us out of here on time. Next is public comment period. Any member of the public may address the board on any item not on the agenda. You've got 3 minutes. Any member of the public wishing to address the board? Seeing none, thank you very much. Public comment period is closed. Executive officer report. Our executive officer is not here. The one thing I would like to mention is that earlier this week, it's been a whirlwind week, Supervisor Potter, Mayor Rubio, Michael Hulamard, executive officer, and staffer Robert Norris and I went to D.C., spent 2 days of basic lobbying. It was very successful. It looks like, if everything works out, and I think we've had some almost strong assurances by one of the staffers there, that we may have brought back between $300,000 and $500,000 for FORA to use. Can't go into details, it's very sensitive, but when it does go through and comes back here, we'll inform everybody what happened and how we got it. The other thing is there's a big battle going on between Department of Defense and the EPA. Up to now, all the exploded munitions that we have out there in FORA were considered hazardous materials, and the EPA labeled them as basically hazardous materials. DOD wants to move the unexploded ordnance off that list, and I guess primarily so they won't be responsible in the future. The problem is, if that occurs, are the land use jurisdictions trying to get PLL insurance to cover themselves will be very difficult, if not impossible. So we discussed, we went to DOD and talked to the folks there. We went to EPA and had a very willing folks that want to back us. We're trying to keep the battle down at the lowest level, where there's going to be a decision by EPA and DOD with regard to FORA. That's all we really want. EPA wants to raise the issue to the national level, to have a major battle between DOD nationwide and EPA nationwide. We went to Congressman Sam Farr's office. He's on our side. He's working hard behind the scenes. A very critical issue for us, and under normal circumstances, EPA would probably win. However, if it's raised to a national level and DOD's back against the wall, it's felt, they may go to the White House, and the White House usually backs DOD. So that's a major issue that we're working on, the staff's working on, Congressman Farr is working on our behalf. So Ralph, did you have anything else about that trip?
No, I'll just say it was a very positive trip. We did speak with various government agencies regards to issues here at Fort Ord, including up to building removal and some of the other major items that are on our work program. We were received well, and I think that we're going to see some good outcomes as we go forward through the year.
Again, our executive officer is well respected back there. The door's open where we go. We're lucky to have Michael Hulamard running the staff of this organization. That's all I've got with regard to the executive officer report. I'm sure that Michael will talk more about it when he comes back. There's information in the packets, each one of your packets there. Any items from members you'd like to share? Seeing none, ladies and gentlemen, we are adjourned. Thank you very much for your participation and hard work.
Have a nice day.